Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast, presented by Yahoo Fantasy. I'm John Macri, joined as always by PFF's lead fantasy analyst, Nathan Jahnke. Nate, preseason's done. We are past the roster cut deadline as well, and now it's just kind of full steam ahead into the biggest fantasy draft weekend of the year, and then week one right after that. So I know you've been updating a ton of articles for Republish and recently. So, how's that going? And more importantly, how are you doing these busy days?
Doing fine. Yesterday, definitely a busy day with 1,000-something players getting cut. So keeping track of that for everything for the website, have updated depth charts, have updated rankings from all that. But of course, that's all going to change today because people will get claimed off waivers. We already had 2 wide receiver trades this morning. So it'll be another fun day today.
Yeah, it's wild times, and shout out to our editors too, Ben and John, who have to deal with all of our updates and edits to articles and stuff like that as all this news comes in. Because same thing, like for all the IDP stuff that I've been doing, there's just constant changing players and new players getting signed and stuff like that result in having to update a ton of stuff. So I know you're the exact same way, and I got rankings coming out updated tomorrow too. So I've just been updating those really closely, and there's just a ton of news, man. This is it. Like we're in fantasy draft season here at the thick of it now. It's going to be a super busy weekend. So many people are going to be locked into their draft rooms this weekend, and we've covered so much information and so many players all off season long, kind of leading into this time of the year, so that you guys, the listeners, are all ready to kind of dominate your drafts. But understandably, not everyone has been tuned in all off season long to know the players that maybe we like the most, or the ones that we've been drafting the most ourselves. So today what we'll kind of do is go over our personal favorites at each position to target in drafts this year, our my guys, if you will. But of course, these aren't the only players that we're in on. Just make sure to go back and listen or watch on YouTube all of the topics that might be of interest to you if you want to hear more. Or you could get yourself a PFF Plus subscription and read the many articles that we've been writing all year long leading into this week, and get the best data and information in the league. That includes across access to player grades, fantasy and betting tools, draft guides, all the great content that, in my honest opinion, PFF does better than anyone else. And that'll continue all season long. So get in there, dominate your fantasy leagues this season with PFF Plus. But Nate, what do you say we get into it here and kick things off with your first my guy? We'll start with the quarterback position, former number 1 overall pick, potentially in for his best fantasy season yet. Nate, what's got you into Trevor Lawrence this season?
I think he can have a huge season. Of course, the wide receiver room looks great. They have Brian Thomas Jr., who proved himself to be one of the top wide receivers last year, added Travis Hunter. Diami Brown was added to the team. They just traded for Tim Patrick today, so he mixes into that wide receiver room. And I think Liam Cohen's offense is probably the biggest thing for me that'll change this offense. Lawrence averaged a 9.9 average depth of target last year, which was very high for him. And Liam Cohen's offenses typically have a below average depth of target. And Lawrence, over these past 3 seasons, his deep ball accuracy has been in the bottom quarter of the league, but his accuracy on those shorter passes are in the top quarter of the league. So I think we're going to see more passes that Lawrence tends to be good at. I think he has the receivers to take advantage of those passes. And the best part is Lawrence, you can get him right at the end of your fantasy drafts. He is outside of the top 20 in terms of ADP for quarterbacks. And I think he's someone that you can put in your lineup anytime they have a good matchup. Luckily, he plays in a nice division, which helps him out there. So I think he's in store for a big season. We've seen him have stretches of time where he's a top 10 fantasy quarterback. So I think we can see that again. And you are getting him at a price tag much lower than the top 10.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, I love these kind of guys that you can get as like QB3s and like super flex, and they could potentially kind of deliver like these high-end fantasy seasons, or QB2 obviously in one QB leagues, right? But Lawrence has been a really common like target for me, right up there with guys like JJ McCarthy and Michael Penix and Bryce Young. Like, I really like the potential of these guys, and Lawrence included. Obviously, like, I've been mixing it up a fair bit as far as like super flex drafts for my like QB3 targets. But I mean, you laid out all the upside there, right? Like Brian Thomas Jr., Travis Hunter alone could end up being like a top 3 wide receiver duo in the league by season's end, right? I really like Brenton Strange as a breakout candidate this season as well. And like you said, they added Tim Patrick, and look, if Liam Cohen is the real deal and he can turn this offense around and get Trevor Lawrence back on track, then we're absolutely cooking. And maybe, just maybe, Jacksonville becomes like a dark horse in the AFC to win the AFC South, right? Because it's a relatively open division, and Jacksonville has a fair bit going for them. So maybe, I mean, anyways, I really like Trevor Lawrence. Like he's laid out, he's really grown on me this offseason and has become like, yeah, one of those top targets for me, especially in Superflex. I just really like him where he's going, and a lot of people are kind of letting him slide. Like Yahoo right now, he's going as QB 29, so like really low in the Yahoo ADP. So definitely somebody that I'm in on for sure. Okay, so my pick is another one that I just kind of keep coming back to, whether again it's in Superflex or even one QB. Like if I were to miss out on one of the top tier options, then Justin Fields of the New York Jets is one for me that I keep coming back to. And for me, like Fields, he's being drafted later, typically outside the top 10 as well. He is Yahoo's QB 10 and ADP, but a sleeper and stuff like that, he's a little bit later. So he's really kind of one of my favorite bets, I think, to deliver like a top tier fantasy season. And he's become just a consistent target for me in drafts this season, right? Like every time that we get Fields as a starter in the NFL, he immediately comes into consideration as like a top starting fantasy quarterback on a weekly basis with that kind of elite upside. So naturally, I think we should be drafting him as such. Even just last season, Fields, he only started 6 games and he ranked as the overall QB6 in fantasy over that 6-game stretch, which was, the case in his previous seasons with like Chicago as well, where if he was healthy and starting, he often scored at least as a top 10 fantasy quarterback. He played 15 games in 2022. He finished as the overall QB7. He only played 12 games in 2023, but he still averaged 20 points per game. Now, what I like about his potential this season is that he doesn't have anyone looking over his shoulder for a potential starting job. So he's a lot safer than he was last season. So that way we can kind of be all the way back in on him. Obviously, his biggest advantage over the quarterbacks going outside the top 5 is that willingness to run the ball, deliver the elite and often historic fantasy totals with his rushing ability alone, right? Like him and Michael Vick are the only 2 quarterbacks to hold 3 of the top 15 all-time rushing performances in a game by a quarterback, putting him in this kind of prestigious company, right? And, even last season with Pittsburgh, like, it felt like a more reserved offense for him. Like he only ran 5.9 times per game. That was 3 carries per game fewer than his previous year in Chicago. And then down again, even from 2022, when he had that QB7 overall season, when he was averaging 20.6 points per game and 9.4 runs per game that year. So I don't expect any kind of restraints on him in 2025. Like he should have much more control to run the offense that best suits him, which is almost certainly going to lead to like that high-end rushing production, right? So, people are going to be down on him because of the passing ability. Of course, that's not the best. He's often ranked 25th or lower in PFF passing grade every year, but doesn't necessarily need it. Like we saw this in 2019, Lamar Jackson, high-end passing wasn't necessary for him to have an elite fantasy season and finish as the QB1 overall. He just needed to kind of have those outlier rushing totals, which Fields is definitely capable of. So we'll still ideally see some better passing from him. I think Garrett Wilson, really helps that. He's been on the cusp of kind of joining the elite receivers in the league. So I don't think we need the elite passing from Fields, considering his rushing ability, considering the ADP. And if he's anything close to average as a passer, like rushing ability alone should push him into that QB1 range. So just really love Fields at this point. I mean, again, he's somebody that if I miss out on the elite guys at the top, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, even Joe Burrow, sometimes like Justin Fields becomes my immediate top target. And then for Superflex, love getting him as my second QB option if I can pull that off as well. So yeah, big into Fields this year.
I also like him this year. I believe I am as my quarterback 8. And I think with Fields, a big thing to note is just who you're drafting with, because I think that plays a huge factor in where Fields ends up getting drafted. If you're playing with people who aren't the biggest fantasy football experts, I don't think Fields goes in the top 10. I think people will look at the quarterbacks with the bigger names, bigger passing ability. You'll be able to get Fields a lot later, like you said, maybe in a super flex league as your quarterback 2. In those kind of leagues, I am basically always getting Fields whenever I can get him. But if I'm in a more competitive league, I think most people are more in tune of where Fields should be getting drafted like you said, Yahoo, he has a 7th round ADP. Some places you can get him a little bit later than that. But in other places where he is going in that top 10, sometimes maybe even a little earlier in the top 10, just depending on who you're drafting with, in those cases, I end up not getting Fields because I do like Lawrence. I like some of the other quarterbacks you mentioned that are going later as well. The JJ McCarthy, Michael Penix, Bryce Young. I am comfortable having 2 of those quarterbacks as my quarterbacks. F Fields is going at a proper spot of where he should be going, which is happening some of the time. So I think there's probably a pretty big thing that, like, it's happened other years as well, but just know who you're drafting with, know how in tune they are to recent news, because there are other players like an Emeka Egbuka, like a Krosky Merritt, who their ADP is a lot lower on some sites. The people who know what's going on know that they should be drafted a lot higher. If you're in a league with those people, you have to compete against them for those kind of players. If not, you can wait, let them slide, end up with a much better team. So I think Fields is a good time to remind yourself that you need to know who you're drafting with in order to have the best strategy going into your fantasy drafts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, Krosky Merritt, it's a good example of that, because I had a few drafts this weekend, and there was one where he went in the 6th or 7th round, somewhere in that range, and then another one where I literally got him in the final round of the draft. So it just, again, just depends who you're drafting with and how locked in they are. But Nate, let's move to the running back position now, where you have Minnesota Vikings running back Jordan Mason as one of your favorite running backs this year. Tell us what's got you so high on Mason for this season.
One, I like him as a player. He is graded very well for us. He has a career yards per carry of over 5. He's good in basically every situation. He's in Minnesota where, yeah, he has to compete with Aaron Jones, but he does have double the breakaway percentage of Aaron Jones. I think he's the better runner at this point in their career. Mason is basically in his prime. Jones is another year away from his prime. And it sounds like they want kind of a 50-50 split, in which case I expect Jones to be playing on the passing downs, Mason to be playing on the early downs. So I think Mason is going to have the more fantasy relevant role in that offense. We have also seen Kevin O'Connell throughout his career be pretty fluid of how they use their running backs. We've seen some coaches that, regardless of which running backs they have, they put them in a specific role, and that's the role you expect them to have. The Rams being the prime example of that, of they always have one clear early down runner. But Minnesota, it's changed from week to week depending on who's healthy, who's playing well. So I think if Mason is playing as well as I expect him to play, that can lead to more playing time down the line. And then a lot of this is also just really excited about the Vikings offense in general. I think JJ McCarthy has a chance to be the best quarterback they had. They just upgraded the wide receiver room this morning with Adam Thielen back, and Thielen's been a part of that offense, has been successful in that offense before. So I think Thielen will still be able to help as a role player there. TJ Hockenson should be healthier this season. Their left tackle is healthy after missing a lot of last year, and he's a top 5 player in terms of PFF run block grade for left tackles. They completely reworked the interior of the offensive line, so it's a lot of upgrades across the board to basically surround it around Justin Jefferson, who's already there. That's the one area where they haven't needed to upgrade. So expect this to be potentially a top 5 scoring offense. I think Mason will be that goal line running back. I don't think they'll be doing a lot of tush pushes in Minnesota. I think Mason's going to be the guy at the goal line, and yeah, plenty of receivers will score receiving touchdowns, but I think Mason will get a lot of those 1 and 2 yard touchdown runs as well. So that touchdown total should help him a lot.
Yeah, I really like this backfield. Really, I find that I end up with a decent amount of Mason and Aaron Jones. I know you have Mason ahead of Aaron Jones, but I find myself still being fine taking shots on Aaron Jones as well. He's kind of someone that I get from that kind of dead zone territory quite a bit, and we'll see how they use him. Right, he was fairly effective last year. He had over 250 carries, I think it was, right, 1,100 yards. He's not top 10 fantasy asset Aaron Jones of that, well, I guess it was a couple years ago now, 2022 and 2020 era, right? But he was kind of fine last year, finished as the RB14. He's definitely, at risk of missing time. That we know that, especially as he kind of gets older there. But yeah, as one of both of these guys kind of being drafted outside the top 24 running backs, I don't hate taking shots on them at all. I think both of them have a decent chance to hit. And I mean, Minnesota brought Aaron Jones back to that 2-year, $20 million contract this offseason. But I agree. I think Jordan Mason has more upside at this point. Like you said, a little bit more explosive. Like he's got to stay healthy too. But every time we've seen him, he's been really effective, right? So I find myself taking shots on both of these guys in drafts. And just because, again, like you said, the Minnesota offense, really intriguing this year. I think they could be really effective. So we could get some fantasy goodness out of either one of these running backs, potentially both if they're really good. But yeah, like the call there.
Yeah, I'll add, like, they have the luxury right now of adding players for specific roles, like adding Adam Thielen, who I don't think Thielen will necessarily be fantasy relevant in Minnesota, but he'll help the offense. And like, I know you mentioned Aaron Jones' injury history. I'm not too concerned about him getting injured because I think they will limit his playing time a bit more this year. And that limiting his playing time will help him with his longevity, which I think is all part of that plan of let's limit Aaron Jones, let him still be great when he does touch the football, but not have him touch the football quite as much as he has in some other past years.
Yeah, absolutely. And for sure. And like Adam Thielen coming into, like, just kind of helps fill that void, like with Jordan Addison suspended for the first few games of the season. Like they're just deep all the way around now. So it just makes sense that they can have a really good offensive season. So yeah, excited about the Vikings and watching them this year. So my guy running back also has some backfield competition, also comes with kind of a history of missed time with injury. So we'll see how this goes for us as we get a little risky here. But I've gone with Kenneth Walker, the third of the Seattle Seahawks. And, you know, I understand that the team has been kind of talking up Zach Charbonnet a fair bit this offseason and talking more of a split. Like I feel like this is true of 90% of the teams in the league. They give us this speech about shared workloads and this guy looks good and we want to get him more involved, etc. It happens every single season. Sometimes it's true, other times not so much, right? And the thing that I think throws a wrench into those plans more often than not is one back playing much better and being more effective than the other. And coming out of last season, Kenneth Walker, I thought was much better than Zach Charbonnet. And look, Charbonnet, he's fine. I think that Walker, you know, what he did last year though, and throughout his NFL career kind of establishes him as the superior back. And I'll get into the numbers here in a sec, because I know the injury history is what scares people, right? Like coming out of last year and in this offense specifically, Walker, I think he has the RB1 potential. He just needs to stay healthy because the role last year and the underlying metrics from last year indicate like he had his best season as a runner that we've seen in his NFL career. And if he could keep that going, and it was a lot of stable metrics that he really delivered in, I think he has a chance here to kind of be a top 10, potentially higher running back this season. But again, staying healthy, right? So you got Clint Kubiak coming in as the Seahawks offensive coordinator. I think that right away creates optimism. He's been a part of offenses that have supported an overall RB1 in the past in 2023. Obviously, that was Christian McCaffrey, and then also an RB8 just as recently as last year with Alvin Kamara, right? So both of those guys ranked in the top 5 at their position in total targets. So that was a big part of it. Now, and the receiving down role for Walker, we've talked about this before, but it was never really a big part of his game during his first 2 seasons. But it really became a big part of his game last season. He saw a career high in total targets that led the entire Seattle backfield. Despite him missing 6 games, he still finished with more targets than Zach Charbonnet because he was playing that 2-minute drill, but he was also just being more reliable as a receiver. It was a big boost for his fantasy value. He went from 13 routes and 2.2 targets per game in 2023 to 20.4 routes and 4.7 targets per game in 2024. He also posted a top 10 PFF receiving grade for the position and a top 10 yards per route run average for the position at 1.33. Both of those were better than Zach Charbonnet. So I think there's reason to believe that he can kind of continue dominating that role in Kubiak's offense. And then on early downs, obviously, I mentioned kind of, you know, the stable metrics and him having his best season, 91.3 rushing grade last year for Kenneth Walker. That was a top 5 mark for the position. Also led the entire league in missed tackles forced per attempt at 0.40. The elusiveness, obviously, it was important for him to find success because he was running behind a very below average offensive line. He ranked 44th among 46 qualifying running backs in yards before contact per attempt, which is more a result of the offensive line than, you know, his fault. And he was still finding ways to make the most of his opportunities. So even with Charbonnet there as a potential threat, I think Walker's in a really nice position here in Kubiak's offense to serve as a top target for me in drafts right now. I have him ranked inside that top 12 range, but you can often get him at RB2 prices, and that's led to me scooping up a ton of him in drafts this year.
There. Yeah, he is someone that I have had way ahead of consensus for a bit. I have cooled on that a little. I still have him above ADP, but I also have Zach Charbonnet way above ADP as well. The team kept 2 fullbacks and 4 tight ends on the roster. That doesn't say how much you want to run the ball. I'm not sure what does, but Walker, like you said last year, he graded very well. I think he's kind of a unique running back in that a lot of his grades have come from kind of big plays, so that's definitely helped him. Charbonnet is someone that I think's been a decent running back, but hasn't graded as well as Walker. But my only concern is that Walker has missed a lot of training camp this year due to injury, so it's been Charbonnet that's been playing with the starters and has been able to impress the coaching staff throughout this time. So ideally, Walker is able to get healthy and show the coaches why he deserves to be that clear top running back. But I'm not sure it's going to happen right away. And if it's not happening right away, I'm a little concerned if it happens at all. We don't know exactly how this running back rotation will work out, since while we've seen, like you said, the last 2 years, them have, or the at coaching staff have a clear lead running back. That hasn't always been the case. There's been times where they've used a committee approach, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see both running backs a bit early in the season, but I could also see them relying heavily on both running backs early in the season. So we could see fantasy value out of both players. I do agree that a healthy Walker is the better of the 2 running backs, whether or not the coaching staff also learns to see that once Walker's on the field. Hopefully that ends up happening. So I'm still taking Walker ahead of ADP. I did move Omari and Hampton ahead of Walker, just since Hampton I'm a little more confident will be that RB1 in an offense that clearly likes to run the ball. So because of that, I've been getting more Hampton than Walker, because those are 2 guys similar-ish ADP range that you're drafting in the same area. So I haven't been getting quite as much Walker recently, specifically because of Hampton there. But I'm perfectly happy to get Walker on my team, especially if he's falling a little bit. And regardless, I'm also happy to get Charbonnet later, because that is the range where you're more taking shots at running backs. And there's a lot of backfields where we don't know who's going to be the runner. We don't know how the split's going to end up working out. Like the Jacksonville running or backfield comes to mind, in that there's 3 running backs. Any of them could see playing time. One of them could get traded at some point. We could see a committee the entire season. No one could end up standing out, where in Seattle, like if Walker's hurt, Charbonnet's the guy. If Charbonnet is hurt, Walker's the guy. So
Yeah, it's I'm fairly optimistic about it. This is really kind of the first year that I've been like all in on Kenneth Walker, right? Like it took a few seasons, right? So I understand I haven't been burned by him before, and like the injury history, right? But it has been frustrating to see him not be out there during training camp and stuff like that. But it seems like he's good to go here for week 1, so that's got me feeling better. And like you said, like if he can continue to play as well as he did last season, like I think that he takes over that RB1 role once again. So before we go any further and into the wide receivers and tight ends, I do want to let everybody know that this episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back. And again, there is never a better reminder of that than all of our fantasy drafts that we're doing right now into this weekend, heading into week 1. And this year, Nate and I are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first timer or a veteran making your millionth league. I've mentioned it before, but love playing on Yahoo because they not only let me play 5 separate IDP positions, but they also have that super fun rating system. And they have Travis Hunter as cornerback eligible as well. I didn't realize this until like my second of 5 Yahoo drafts this past weekend. But once I did, I drafted Travis Hunter in every draft, and now you can too. So with season kickoff on September 4th, now is the time to start playing Yahoo. If you want or Yahoo Fantasy Football, which offers so many more fun ways to compete. Want more ways to play? You could try the brand new Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine League mode, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated weekly until 1 team is left standing. If you want to play instantly with friends, you could try the new Draft with Friends mode. If you prefer the classics, you could get your crew together and go head-to-head in a private league. And if you have no crew, no problem. You could join a public league as well, which is the easiest way to play. So just go to yahoofantasy.com/PFF. That is yahoofantasy.com/PFF. All right, off to the wide receiver position now, Nate, and let's start with your pick here. One who has finally has a starting quarterback confirmed. First of all, the last starting quarterback decision that we've kind of been waiting on for heading into week one. So now your guy Chris Olave can dominate the target share in New Orleans, Nate. So tell us about your Olave for Olave. I'm sorry.
So first off, he is graded well in the past. He has a high target rate, 25.4% target rate over the last 3 seasons, which is top 10 for wide receivers, also top 10 in yards per route run at 2.21. So he's been one of the most consistent great wide receivers that we have seen in recent seasons. I okay with the quarterback situation. I was going to be fine with it. Whoever ended up winning that starting job, we have seen plenty of wide receivers dominate in fantasy, even without a great quarterback. We've seen that with the Giants last year with Malik Neighbors. Neighbors was an elite wide receiver, despite having multiple quarterbacks throughout the season. So not too concerned about the quarterback situation. I'm a little concerned about the concussion stuff, but I know we've talked about it before of like, Olave you can put in your starting lineup, and if he suffers that concussion, then you at least know that you can't put him in your lineup. Or a lot of other guys that you're drafting in the range of Olave, you're risking and not knowing if you can put them in your lineup. You don't know when you should give up on them, when you can trust them to consistently be in your lineup. Olave is someone I think you can consistently trust in your lineup. And then also this last week of the preseason, I know a lot of teams played their third string players throughout the last week of the preseason, so there wasn't a whole lot to take away from that week. The Saints were one of the teams that did play their starters, and it was the first week that we saw Olave, Shaheed, and Cooks all together at the same time. We saw all 3 of them play the first 2 weeks of the preseason, just not at the same time. But we saw them and what they would do when they're all together. And it was Olave consistently lining up in the slot and 3 wide receiver sets, which I think is really good news because we've seen Kellen Moore's offenses before. It's a wide receiver who lines up in the slot who gets all of the fantasy production. It's been multiple different teams. We've seen it. A.J. Brown was the one exception, and he's A.J. Brown, so that's understandable. I don't think Olave is going to play like 100% of his snaps in the slot or anything. I think it'll be a mix of outside and in the slot because they also have backup wide receivers who can play there. But I think having an increased amount of snaps in the slot where he has seen more yards per route run in his career, I think will help his fantasy production. So I think he is someone that you can have as a top 20 fantasy wide receiver without having to pay that top 20 price tag for him, just mostly with that concussion risk.
Yeah, it's true. But like the concussion risk stuff, it's kind of baked into his ADP, right? That's why he's going outside the top 30 wide receivers. And it's a risk, sure, but it's not, it's not like you're taking a crazy risk as far as the price tag goes, right? It's not like taking, like, I don't know, like Christian McCaffrey in the second round with the calf injury, right? Like, okay, sure, Christian McCaffrey, he seems fine right now, right? But maybe a bad example because he's healthier than last season, but at the same time, like this is a guy you're getting at wide receiver 33 on Yahoo right now. He's been no worse than a wide receiver 2 in his last 2 seasons when he was healthy. Like he has that wide receiver 1 upside as well. So the risk just doesn't feel as risky considering, again, the upside and just hoping he doesn't suffer like a season-ending injury. Like the majority of players, they get banged up, they miss some time. As long as it's not a season ender, I'm fine with the cost, right? And as much as, we like Olave specifically, it also helps that there's no real target competition there for him at wide receiver and tight end. It's similar to like Garrett Wilson with the Jets, Malik Neighbors with the Giants. Like as long as these guys are healthy, they're going to get a ton of targets. And sure, the targets aren't going to come with like the same quality and accuracy as if it was, say, like Joe Burrow throwing them the ball, but you throw enough passes in that direction and it matters less, right? Enough of them will be catchable that he's going to be a fantasy starter for us every week. And at this price, wide receiver 33 on Yahoo, like I don't think we could get picky about the quality of targets when he's arguably going to be, top 10 in the league in total targets, assuming he's healthy. So yeah, really like the price for Olave right now. Definitely a favorite target here as well.
I'll add, I think the competition for target thing in some places, there's a lot of moving parts, new quarterbacks, new receivers, new tight ends. With New York, it's an entire new wide receiver and tight end room and a new quarterback. So we think Garrett Wilson should have a ton of targets. We don't know exactly how to work out. In New Orleans, it's still Alvin Kamara running back. It's still Rashid Shaheed as the second wide receiver. It's still Juwan Johnson as the tight end. The quarterback's been there before. So yeah, it's a new coaching staff and that'll change things. But we already know a lot about who's in this offense and who gets targeted and those kind of things with the Saints.
For sure. Okay, so I too have gone with a wide receiver drafted in the first round of his respective draft class, but I love the new shiny toys as well. So he's a first round pick from this year's draft class. I'm talking, of course, about T-Mac, Tetairoa McMillan of the Carolina Panthers. For me, going as wide receiver 30 right now on Yahoo, I have him as wide receiver 16 in the rankings, because I really don't think that there's a better value than right now than Tetairoa McMillan, who, again, going as wide receiver 30 and set to operate as the clear wide receiver 1 in that offense as a rookie. And, this is the thing with like highly drafted NFL players or rookies in their first year for fantasy. Like a lot of the time, they're going to be drafted much closer to their floor than their ceiling, assuming they can, deliver on that potential that the team drafted them to be. Now, it's not a guarantee that it'll happen. A lot of NFL draft picks don't work out, but we can bet on the ones who at least check all the boxes to deliver before we kind of know for sure, and just trust that process, right? And I think McMillan has the skill set and the situation to thrive right out the gate in the NFL and for fantasy. His availability for almost the entire 5th round of fantasy drafts consistently makes him kind of this obvious target for me. It starts with Bryce Young, just continuing, the trajectory that he was on in the latter half of last season. He was one of the top 10 highest graded passers from week 8 on. He was flashing true kind of breakout potential. So if Young can operate at a similar level in 2025, McMillan is going to be the primary beneficiary of that and a consistent threat to kind of put up those wide receiver 1 numbers. Carolina's offense last year, it wasn't great, but they weren't like so far away from top 10 or anything like that you're too scared there. It's an above average offensive line as well. So, and you combine that with Bryce Young's performance in the latter half of the season, I think you have a legitimate wide receiver 1 candidate in Tetairoa McMillan. I don't think it's unrealistic to expect the Panthers to take another step forward this season. Obviously McMillan, he's going to have to deliver on his own potential early on to be this, kind of wide receiver 1 or 2 type for fantasy, where I have him as a wide receiver 16 right now. But I think he's going to get every opportunity to prove that he's worthy of the, that first round top 10 investment in him and build on that kind of promising rookie profile coming out of Arizona, right? He had an 89.5 PFF receiving grade, which was 83rd percentile among wide receiver prospects since 2019. And he was one of college football's most impressive performers against single coverage as well. He earned a 94.2 career PFF receiving grade, which was 97th percentile on those single coverage plays. So I think both of those areas obviously are key for him at the next level. He's being drafted again as a wide receiver 3 right now. I think his potential should easily allow him to clear that range and outperform those expectations. Again, highly drafted rookies who find success in the NFL, they're typically drafted closer to their floor. I think that's the case for McMillan here in 2025, and I think he should hit the ground running and become a top fantasy performer in year 1.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, like, the people who play fantasy football overreact to one thing that happened last year. Like we were just talking about it with Kenneth Walker, of like, if Kenneth Walker burned you in the past, you're probably not going to draft him again. And Christian McCaffrey, you mentioned, like, lots of people are not drafting Christian McCaffrey this year because they've burned them one of 3 times in the past 5 years. So that impacts the ADP of people. And I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is probably doing something to that effect with this rookie wide receiver class, because he was drafted very high last year and he didn't pay off, even though Malik Neighbors did pay off, Brian Thomas Jr. paid off. But I think people are a little bit afraid to draft these elite wide receivers that were drafted very high in the NFL draft this year because of what happened with Marvin Harrison Jr. last year. But that is a sample size of one player, and we have so much other evidence that it's okay to draft these highly drafted rookie wide receivers early in drafts, because a lot of times they do pay off. So I also think Travis Hunter is getting drafted later than he should. I think T-Mac also fits that. Played 19 of 20 snaps with the starters in the preseason, so it's very clear that his starting job, his playing time, is not anything to be concerned about. We picked out which players we were going to talk about yesterday, and then Adam Thielen got traded today, so that is one less player to worry about for target competition, and that's been Bryce Young's favorite target the past 2 years. So the fact that not just that he's gone, but Carolina feels comfortable enough of having this offense without Adam Thielen in it, at least to me, speaks to how much they trust T-Mac to be the new top target in this offense. For me, a lot of it, as well as just Dave Canales' offenses in the past, have very much featured these X receivers, especially when it comes to scoring touchdowns. We saw DK Metcalf have his best season in this kind of offense, scored double-digit touchdowns. Mike Evans scored 13 times with Canales as the lead guy in the offense. So we've seen these wide receivers do so well, specifically in this position that Team X playing in the offense. And he was consistently the X receiver for them in the preseason, also played a little bit with the backups too, which was fine. But I am also expecting very big things out of him this year, and I'm getting him in a ton of drafts as well.
Yeah, he's been a favorite of mine. And yeah, hopefully people aren't too afraid of, just betting on the rookie wide receiver. Again, like you said, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., Ladd McConkey, like all of those guys hit last year just because Marvin Harrison Jr. didn't. And even if you're looking at Carolina, like Xavier Legette didn't hit, right? So like he was a first round pick for them, but like Xavier Legette, very different profile coming out of college than Tetra McMillan. There were a lot of kind of red flags to say that he's going to take some time in the NFL before he can become potentially a strong fantasy asset, and if he hits at all, right? So very different than Tetra McMillan, who has, again, checks a lot of the boxes that we're kind of looking for that kind of immediate impact production. So yeah, I'm excited for Tetra McMillan. I think it'll be a good year for him. But let's move on to our final position for today, the tight ends. Look, Taylor Swift has her, my guy, Nate. But quite honestly, I think ours are better. And that starts with your tight end two in the rankings here, Mr. George Kittle. Tell us about him.
So he's finished in the top 6 in fantasy points per game for a tight end each of the past 7 seasons. His 94.3 receiving grade over those 7 seasons is the best among tight ends, barely beating out Travis Kelce there. Kelce has run nearly 2,000 more routes during that time, so Kelce's done it on a much larger sample size of routes. But Kittle has graded extremely well when given the opportunities. And then we've seen these past couple years with Brock Purdy as his quarterback play a huge difference in his fantasy production, because he is someone where his production's always been restricted for being in the San Francisco run-first offense, which restricts the number of routes he runs. And because they're typically a winning team as well, that also restricts the routes he's run later in games. But he's been able to make up for it with Brock Purdy at quarterback because of his big plays. From 2019 to 2022, he was held to between 300 and 500 receiving yards in intermediate and deep passes each season. But with Purdy, it's been over 600 receiving yards in these situations the past 2 years. And that goes along with all of those other short passes or passes behind the line of scrimmage. So even though he doesn't see quite the same volume as some of these other players, he is making up for it in big plays in a way that we do not see out of tight ends. And I know there's a number of injuries to the 49ers receiving room as well. I don't think that matters all that much. I think he's going to see his targets regardless. So even if the 49ers receivers get healthier as the season goes on, if you look in the past at some of his splits with or without different receivers, it's been basically the same as long as he has Brock Purdy at quarterback. So as long as Purdy stays healthy, I think Kittle's in store for another excellent season. And especially when you look at the tight end position, there's reason to be concerned about a ton of other guys. So I think he is one of the safest plays. And because I am so willing to get a tight end early, it's basically almost always Trey McBride or George Kittle, just depending on where I'm drafting.
Yeah, I love Kittle this year as well. Like, it's kind of crazy just how good he is. Like, he really might be the best tight end in the NFL. Like, as far as everything, that doing all the things that the league asks a tight end to do, I don't think there's anyone like him as far as the ability to both block and just be a mismatch weapon in the passing game. And he's also like incredibly efficient with his opportunities. So like, as much as, people like may be concerned about target competition, if we assume that the Niners receiving core along with Christian McCaffrey is fully healthy, which I mean, lately it feels like they never are. So I think Kittle just continues to just make the most of his opportunities, like you said, at a rate that no other tight end really can. I mean, so here I got the tight end yards per route run leaders in each regular season since 2018 per PFF, right? So 2018, George Kittle. 2019, George Kittle. 2020, George Kittle. 2021, George Kittle. 2022, Chig Okonkwo. 2023, George Kittle. 2024, George Kittle. The guy is as efficient as you could possibly get at the position. And again, like whether it's target competition or whatever, it doesn't matter. Like he gets his opportunities at a high rate and he makes the most of them every single time. So yeah, I mean, as a top 3 tight end, I think he's a no-brainer for me as well. Like, and you got him as tight end too. And I absolutely understand it, especially, going over the kind of concerns we saw with Brock Bowers in the preseason. You did an excellent video on that, that people should check out if they haven't already. But yeah, absolutely love George Kittle as always. And then for me, Nate, I also went with a top 5 tight end. I think, kind of we're both in kind of agreement that you want to lock down one of these 4 or 5 top tight ends this year to kind of eliminate the potentially significant drop off in consistency. So that's why I've included TJ Hockenson on the list. I have him as tight end 4. Yahoo's got him as tight end 5. And obviously targeting one of like the top 2 or top 3 guys is the ideal strategy in drafts this year. It isn't always possible, right? If your league mates kind of have the same idea. So for that reason, TJ Hockenson has just become a common target for me outside of like the Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, George Kittle range. Hockenson's ADP is typically like kind enough to allow for value in drafts. Like he's going in the 5th round. So he's going multiple rounds after the top 3 tight ends and arguably has that same kind of tight end 1 overall upside. He has consistently been a top target since joining the Vikings midway through the 2022 season, 22.7% target rate over that span. That was second only to Justin Jefferson on the team. And he's ranked second on the Vikings in target rate every year, basically. It's been the norm for him since joining the team. That includes 2024, last year when he was coming off that ACL injury and wasn't 100%. So they're still feeding him the ball, even though he's kind of being eased back into action coming off an ACL. And last year, yeah, it was a down year for him coming off the ACL. But I mean, a year removed from that, another year removed from that, I think, him being fully healthy just provides a significantly greater fantasy output for him. And yeah, it isn't uncommon, I think, for, Sam Laporta or Travis Kelce to go ahead of TJ Hockenson in drafts this season. I've seen that a fair bit. But that just creates even greater value for me for a player who, again, finished 2022 and 2023 inside the top 3 for fantasy at his position. And he's going to be in a good bounce back spot as well to get back to that range in 2025, even with a new quarterback. So, I also kind of expect him to find the end zone much more than he did last season after not scoring once in the regular season. So that also helps. There's some positive regression in the touchdown column, but really just, I think a prime candidate here to be, one of our elite fantasy tight ends for this season, even with the addition of Adam Thielen and potentially Jordan Addison. Hockenson has just consistently been a big part of the Kevin O'Connell offense. And again, second only to Justin Jefferson as far as target rate goes. So yeah, excited for Hockenson this year.
So I have Hockenson as my tight end 4. I think, especially when you consider the value compared to Sam Laporta getting drafted typically a full round earlier than Hockenson. That makes Hockenson a nice value if you want to get any kind of tight end in this range whatsoever. I do think we don't have to be as concerned about his playing time this year compared to last year. We did see him rotate a bit in 12 personnel, specifically with Johnny Munt, who's no longer on the team. Preseason, they only played like the 1 drive with the starters, so he was consistently in for 12 personnel, but they don't really have a third tight end that they know that they can trust at this time. They drafted Gavin Bartholomew to be their third tight end. He's been on the PUP list and will start the season there, so he's not there to start the season. They have an undrafted rookie as their third tight end at the moment, so I think Hockenson can consistently be in 12 personnel. So at least, even if he's not exactly the same player he once was, he should at least be going back to the playing time that he once had. So that's one thing that I think we can trust his floor more than a lot of other tight ends because of that. I don't think I would put him in that top 3 range, though. I think there is rightfully a good distance between where those 3 are getting drafted because Trey McBride, George Kittle, Brock Bowers, all 3 of them, pretty much the top targets in their offense. Yeah, there's some wide receivers who could be right around that same range as the tight ends, but I could very easily see all 3 of them leading their teams in targets. I don't know if Hockenson's going to do that with Justin Jefferson there. While the Adam Thielen trade this morning helped one of your players, it hurt the other one because now Minnesota has another quality player that they can throw the ball to. And I think because they have so many weapons, that does hurt Hockenson's ceiling a little bit because I think they're going to score with plenty of other players as well. And that's a big a downside for Sam Laporta too with Detroit. It's that they have the running backs, they have the wide receivers. Laporta is not going to be able to get all the targets they want. So that's, I think Hockenson at tight end 4 is fair. I really do want to get one of those top 3 tight ends if I can. I think Hawkinson's a fine strategy if you wait, but I am also comfortable waiting a couple more rounds for someone like a Tucker Kraft. Tyler Warren's another player who very consistently on the field with the starters. His playing time's not going to be an issue. I've ended up moving him up above other of the sleeper tight ends that we've talked about in other episodes because I'm not concerned at all about Warren's playing time. Daniel Jones at quarterback, that's also going to help significantly compared to Anthony Richardson. So I'm also comfortable if you don't get Hockenson in round 5, waiting another couple rounds because there are guys that I like in round 5, like T-Max there, Hunter's there, RJ Harvey's there. I tend to find myself trying to get one of those running backs or wide receivers and then wait a little longer at tight end if I did miss out on one of the top tight ends.
Yeah, that's a good call. Yeah, I love Tyler Warren this year. He was in one of the featured articles. I think it was the Dark Horse tight end 1 article that I did. But like he's somebody, I think I moved him up to like tight end 8 or something like that this year, just because I want him and I feel more comfortable with him more than, some of the other guys. I almost put him on the list, but I didn't want to have 2 rookies. That was the only thing to cover here. Cause I had Travis Hunter on my list as well. So that would have been another rookie that I would have had to put in there. But Nate, we did get some news before we sign off. I don't know if you saw this from Schefter, but the NFL is aiming for at least a potential 6-game suspension for Chiefs wide receiver Rashee Rice. And he says it would kick in at the start of the season. So Rashee Rice, I know somebody that we've kind of had in that wide receiver 2 range rankings right now. I think you got him as wide receiver 24, looking at your updated rankings here. Potential 6-game suspension. Is that, how far do you think is that going to change the ranking for Rashee Rice for you?
So I had not seen the news before you said it, and my gut instinct was this is good news for him because at one point they were viewing a double-digit game suspension that might not start until October, which put his potential in the fantasy playoffs in jeopardy. If we know it's a 6-game suspension to start the season, then we know he's going to be healthy and ready to go week 7 for the rest of the season.
Right.
And he is someone who has the talent to be a top 10 fantasy wide receiver. He was in that like top 3 or 4 range over those first couple weeks last season in terms of how well he was playing. In the preseason, the Chiefs are a team that it's just their philosophy to play their starters more than most teams, even though they seem like the team that might least need to do it, but they've been doing it. And Rice has been not consistently lining up in the slot, but in the slot more than their other wide receivers because they always rotate guys in and out of the slot, but a very high percentage of his snaps in the slot compared to the other wide receivers, which is good news because I was concerned about Xavier Worthy taking some of those snaps. So I've been getting more excited about Rice whenever he is on the field and healthy, and like knowing that he's coming back from injury. If his suspensions at the start of the season, that's just giving him more time to recover, which they're already comfortable with him playing because they've been playing with him in the preseason. But I think having him be healthy for that 10-game stretch or whatever that you can have him, I'd much rather have him than a lot of the other wide receiver 3 options for the entire season, in part because wide receiver is so deep this year. And that's like also part of why I'm okay taking the risk on Chris Olave, because there are wide receivers in that wide receiver 4 range, even the wide receiver 5 range that I know I can be comfortable having in my starting lineup if I really need them for a couple of weeks here and there. Like Josh Downs comes to mind. We were just talking about Indianapolis, and Michael Pittman as well. Like those are guys you can get later in drafts and you can plug into your starting lineup if you need them for a couple of weeks in the season, and you'll be fine and you can draft them without hurting the rest of your draft strategy. So I'm fine taking those risks at wide receiver early on because there's fine wide receivers later. So I am happy to take a risk on Rashee Rice, and if this suspension holds, then I might even be moving him up my rankings.
Nice. Yeah, I was definitely getting worried that we were going to get something kind of in season, like the suspension, like not get the news before the year. And yeah, like you said, throw kind of wrench into what he could potentially be for us in, the most important weeks of the fantasy season. So yeah, I could definitely see this as a positive here, especially like you said, coming off injury and having a little bit more time to kind of get healthier. So look, we'll see if this is official or whatever. It looks like Schefter just kind of didn't put any kind of definitive take on it here. It says at least 6 games, and it seems like it'll start at the beginning of the year. So we'll see what happens as far as, the official announcement, but at least it looks like we could get something here before week 1, which I think is the most important thing. So something to keep an eye out there. But
I'll add, I just process the 6-game parts. If it's at least 6 games, if it ends up being 8 games or 10 games,
right,
that starts to change things a little bit more. But if it is only 6 games, then everything I just said applies.
Yeah, for sure. All right, that is a wrap for us, our My Guys for all the offensive fantasy positions. And hey, if you want the My Guys of IDP, you could stay tuned for later this week. But either way, thank you all for tuning into this episode. And if you're watching on the YouTubes, please don't forget to like and subscribe. We'd greatly appreciate that. Nate, thank you for sharing your guys as well. And before you go, please do let the good people know what they could find from you on PFF.com this week as we head into a huge draft weekend.
Yeah, it's been updating a ton of articles. We'll have all the rankings, all the cheat sheets up to date. I'll have a bunch of lists going up each day, at least 3 of them a day. Also, if you've missed it the past couple of days, had depth charts based on everything that happened on cutdown day. If you missed anything in the preseason, I had a preseason recap, recapping all 3 games all in one, going through all the players that I thought had a chance of making the roster at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, and saying how those teams use those players in the preseason, just in case you're curious about any of that. I have draft strategy articles as well. And then next week, we'll start having stuff for in season. It's already time to start thinking of the week 1 rankings. So that'll be coming out at least sometime in the next couple of days or so. So if you're looking ahead to week 1 already, if you've already had your draft, we'll start getting you ready for that as well.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I finish up my final draft rankings here for this week, and then literally immediately into the week 1 rankings. So yeah, it'll be fun. And yeah, make sure to check all the stuff at pff.com for those of you that are drafting this weekend, and good luck in doing so. Next week, Nate and I are recording our final off-season episode before heading into week 1. We're going to talk some bold takes for the 2025 season. So hopefully you'll check that out and continue to tune in all season long. But until then, peace out.